I'm Rachel Bennett, 36 years old, and 3 nights ago, my parents informed me without asking that my sister's entire family would be arriving to live in my condo. Not for a visit, not for a weekend, to live here, indefinitely. The kicker, they'd already told her yes before they even picked up the phone to ask me. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to carry the weight when your family expected you to hold everything together. I live in Chicago, just a few blocks from the lake. I've been a financial planner for over a decade now. My condo isn't big, 2 bedrooms and a small home office, but it's mine. I saved for it the hard way, week by week, budget by budget. There's something steady about knowing every lamp and pillow and pot was earned through hours of work. It keeps me grounded. I didn't grow up with much, but my parents gave what they could. My dad worked at the post office. My mom took on shifts at a local diner. We weren't poor, but there wasn't room for extras. Still, they raised us to be kind and dependable. If something needed to get done, you did it. That was the unspoken rule in our house. By the time I was 10, I kept my own savings chart in a spiral notebook, babysat on the weekends, picked up a part-time job in high school, waited tables all through college, and lived on peanut butter sandwiches when the scholarship money ran low. While other girls backpacked across Europe after graduation, I opened a Roth IRA. My younger sister Hannah couldn't have taken a more different route if she tried. 2 years younger than me, always a whirlwind. Charming, spontaneous, the kind of person who'd book a last-minute trip to California to find herself and somehow come back with a sunburn, a guitar, and no job. She had a string of short-lived passions: yoga, pottery, photography. Each one announced with excitement, each one quietly dropped within a few months. Mom always called it exploring her potential. Dad just said she took after Mom's spirit. The message was clear. I was practical. Hannah was passionate. One was praised, the other was pitied. Then Hannah met Jake. He worked as an electrician and had a calming effect on her, at least in the beginning. They got married young, had their first child, Ellie, within a year. Their second, Micah, came not long after. They bought a little 3-bedroom outside of Joliet, and for a while it looked like maybe, just maybe, she was settling into something solid. She'd call me now and then excited about Ellie's reading level or a new herb garden she'd started. I tried to believe this was her turning a corner. I even set up education funds for the kids, quietly, without telling her, just in case. Still, the old habits never fully disappeared. The house needed constant patching. Jake's job wasn't steady. And whenever something fell through the furnace, the fridge, the daycare bills, the phone would ring. Not to ask, not exactly, just a long pause, a deep sigh, and a question like, "You wouldn't happen to know someone who could help?" And I always did. I researched, I loaned, I rearranged meetings. I did what big sisters do, or what I thought they were supposed to. 6 months ago, I started seeing a therapist. Not for any big reason, I just needed space. And Dr. Lang helped me see how much of my life had been shaped around making things easier for everyone else. She called it emotional overfunctioning. I called it Tuesday. That was around the same time I noticed a shift in Hannah's social media. Posts about family dinners and school concerts faded out. In their place, shiny photos of van conversions, wide desert skies, couples smiling in national parks. "This is the life," one caption said. Chasing freedom, not paychecks. She said something to me at our parents' cookout in June that stuck. "Don't you ever get tired of living the same day over and over?" I shrugged. She stared at me like I'd missed the point entirely. "That's not living, Rach. That's surviving." I didn't think much of it then, figured it was just another passing idea. But 2 months later at our usual Sunday dinner, she dropped the news. They were selling the house, buying a van, hitting the road full-time with the kids. I asked about school. She waved it off. "They'll learn more out there than they ever could in a classroom." Our parents, God help them, beamed like they'd just been told she'd made partner at a law firm. And I sat there watching the kids quietly pick at their food and knew this wasn't going to end well. And somehow I knew who they'd expect to pick up the pieces. By the time the farewell party rolled around, I already knew I was the only one who thought this van plan was a mistake. Our parents had ordered a custom cake shaped like a camper. Streamers hung across the backyard fence. Folding chairs circled the fire pit like we were sending Hannah and Jake off on some noble expedition. People clapped when they showed off pictures of the van's bamboo paneling and solar setup. I stood in the corner holding a paper plate of potato salad, watching Ellie and Micah pick at slices of cake with hollow eyes. Jake barely spoke. When I pulled him aside, he admitted the numbers didn't add up. Fuel was more expensive than they'd planned. Campgrounds weren't as cheap as online blogs made them seem. The van itself had cost nearly $60,000, and they'd poured another $30,000 into customizing it. That money had come from the house sale, all of it. No emergency fund, no backup housing, no health insurance plan, just blind hope. They'll learn more from the Grand Canyon than they ever could in a classroom, Hannah had said during dinner a few weeks earlier when she broke the news. That's how she framed it, an adventure, a gift to her children. When I asked about curriculum or medical emergencies or what happens if the van breaks down in the middle of nowhere, she just smiled and said, "You're such a worrier, Rach." The day they left, my parents stood waving in the driveway as the van pulled away. Jake was behind the wheel, his jaw clenched. Hannah leaned out the passenger window, snapping photos. Ellie pressed her face to the glass, her eyes blank. Micah clutched a single toy dinosaur. The rest had been given away. Not enough storage. For the first few weeks, Hannah's social media lit up with pictures of mountain lakes and fairy lights strung from the awning. One post showed Ellie and Micah holding mason jars near a river. Unschooling at its finest, the caption read. Another showed them eating beans from paper bowls beside a campfire. Minimalism means freedom, she wrote. There weren't many details, just poetic lines and sunny filters. I tried asking to video call the kids. She said they were living in the moment. 6 weeks in, things shifted. The posts slowed. When she did post, the captions turned defensive. This life isn't always glamorous. But we're not tourists. We're living. One photo showed the van's interior cluttered laundry draped over cabinet doors, Ellie curled in the corner with a book in her lap. The mechanical issue started in Colorado. Jake had noticed the noise early on, but they couldn't afford to stop. The van needed repairs. My parents told me about it during a Sunday call. They sounded rattled but optimistic. They're just adjusting, my dad said. Startup costs, they'd already sent Juan $500 to help. A few nights later, my phone buzzed at 11:30. Hannah. Her voice was quiet, hushed. Rach were having money trouble. They were stuck in a small town in Utah. Campground fees were higher than expected. Jake hadn't found work yet. The van needed another fix, and gas prices were eating their remaining savings. Could you maybe send a couple thousand, she asked, just until we get to a bigger city? I sat up in bed. Where are you now, Sunset Ridge? Population like 800. There's a gas station and a diner. That's about it. I offered to help her look over their budget, find jobs, come up with a real plan. She went quiet. You've got plenty of money, she finally said. But fine. Forget I asked. Then she hung up. The next morning, her post read, Some people will never understand that freedom matters more than security. Their loss. No regrets. Trust the journey. A few hours later, my mom called to say they'd sent more money. Your sister needs help, she said. What were we supposed to do? Let them struggle? Jake found work here and there, a day rewiring a barn, a few days on a local crew, enough for groceries, not enough to plan ahead. The van broke down again in Nevada. Not a simple repair, a complete transmission failure. The bill, $12,000. The van was undrivable. They limped it into town and checked into a motel called the Sunset Inn. $49 a night, which adds up fast when you've got nothing coming in. My parents called in a panic. We're thinking, my mom said carefully, maybe just temporarily, they could stay with you. My condo, 2 bedrooms, one of which I work from, 800 square foot living space. They'd be quiet, she said. Grateful. It's just until they get on their feet. I asked one question. Have you already told them this is happening? There was a pause. We might have said it was possible. Another pause. They're getting the van back tomorrow. If they drive straight through, they'll be there Saturday morning, 3 days away. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside my window, running through every conversation I needed to have, every sentence I had, to get exactly right. By morning, I typed out a message in the family group chat. It wasn't long, just direct. We need to have an emergency video call tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. Everyone must attend. This is not optional. At 6:59 the next evening, I sat at my kitchen table laptop, open hands folded. One by one, the video squares filled in. My parents in their living room looking tense. Jake in what looked like a motel bathroom, probably the only quiet place he could find. Hannah joined last. Her arms were crossed, her face set. Thanks for joining, I said. I'll get right to it. We need to clear up a misunderstanding. If this is about staying with you, Hannah cut in, we already figured it out. The kids can take the office. Jake and I will use the second bedroom. We'll be out of your hair before you know it. I held her gaze. That's exactly what this is about. And no, you won't be staying here. Not now. Not at all. The silence was immediate. You have the space, my mom said. We talked about this. You're the only one who can help right now. I stayed calm. What you talked about was a plan made without me. I was informed after the fact. And it's not realistic. You live alone in a condo downtown, Hannah snapped. You've got an office, a guest room, a full kitchen. And you're really telling us there's not room for 2 adults and 2 kids. My condo is 200 square feet, I said. The second bedroom fits a full-size bed and barely anything else. My office is 8 by 10. I work from home. My job depends on a quiet space and stable connection. You're exaggerating, my dad said. It's tight, but it's doable. And you're in a good position financially. You can handle the extra expense. I took a breath. Let me make sure I understand. You want me to give up my workspace, my privacy, and my income stability to fix a situation I warned you all about. And you've promised this without asking. That's what family does, my mom said sharply. I let a beat pass. No. Family supports each other through emergencies, not through consequences of choices that were avoidable. You think you're better than us, Hannah said, her voice rising. Just because you chose the safe life, the boring life, you think that gives you the right to judge us for trying something different. I'm not judging your dreams, I said, keeping my voice even. But there's a difference between following a dream and putting your kids in unstable conditions with no plan. You made a choice, and now you're expecting me to carry the cost of it. You don't have kids, she shot back. You don't know what they need. I looked at her directly. They need stability. They need school health care, hot meals, and adults they can count on. None of that is happening right now. Jake shifted on his screen. Then he said, She's right. Hannah turned toward him. What I said? Rachel's right, he repeated. We've been coasting on fumes, and the kids are suffering. I should have put my foot down sooner. I can't believe you're siding with her. I'm not siding with anyone, he said. But pretending this is working isn't helping. We ignored the warning signs, and now we're stuck. And Rachel's condo isn't the solution. That's just another patch. My parents sat in stunned silence. My dad finally asked, What exactly are you saying? Jake looked tired. That we need to start over. For real this time. Find jobs, get a place, get the kids back in school, not another temporary fix. I've been trying to tell you that I said, I'm willing to help with things that actually move you forward. A security deposit, a job lead, a real budget. But I'm not turning my home into a shelter. You're turning your back on us, my mom said. We never thought you'd be so cold. I didn't answer right away. Then I said I've supported Hannah every time she's needed it. I've given more than you know money, time childcare loans I never asked to be paid back. This isn't about coldness. This is about finally saying no more Band-Aids. The call ended soon after that. My parents signed off first. Hannah logged out without another word. Jake stayed for a second longer. Thank you, he said quietly, even if it didn't go over well. That night I sat by the window watching the lights flicker across the lake. I wasn't sure what would come next, but for the first time I hadn't caved. I hadn't carried something that didn't belong to me. I had no way of knowing just how much would shift in the days ahead. 2 mornings after the video call, I booked an emergency session with Dr. Lang. Her office was quiet as always, soft light. Plants in every corner. I sat across from her trying to explain what I'd just done, not the facts exactly, but the shift that had taken place. For the first time, I hadn't compromised. I hadn't given in, and I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow. I keep wondering if I was wrong, I said, if I should have just let them come. She waited a moment, then said, when you've spent your life over-giving, boundaries can feel like betrayal. But that doesn't mean they are. I left with that sentence tucked in my coat pocket. Instead of heading back to the office, I walked to a cafe near my building and opened my laptop. I started searching apartment listings near where Jake and Hannah were stranded. It wasn't a big town, but the cost of living was manageable. I found a few 2-bedrooms ranging from $850 to $100 a month, nothing fancy, but clean and safe. Most were within walking distance of construction sites or small trade shops. I made a list. Then I drafted a plan. If they sold the van, even at a loss, it could cover a deposit and a couple months' rent. Jake's temp jobs could float them for now. If Hannah found part-time work, they could stabilize by spring. It was tight, but possible. Around 8 p.m. that evening, I texted Jake directly. Can we talk privately? I have some ideas. He replied an hour later. Motel lobby, 8 p.m. your time. Hannah takes the kids to the pool then. We connected over video. He looked worn down but alert, like someone waiting for the next shoe to drop. How bad is it? I asked. We've got about 3 days left here. After that, I don't know. The money your parents sent all went to the van repair. Hannah keeps saying the universe will provide, but there's nothing left. What about the kids? He rubbed his face. They're trying. Ellie cries at night. Mike has been wetting the bed again. They don't say much during the day, but they're scared. I nodded. I did some research, I said. There's a place on Birch Avenue, 2-bedroom, $950 a month. I spoke with the property manager. She's willing to move fast if the deposit clears. It's not far from a small electrical contractor's office. They're hiring. He didn't say anything for a long time. You really think this could work if you're ready to start over? Yes. And Hannah, he asked, she won't like it. What she likes isn't the question right now. The kids need a roof and a routine. He nodded. Then he looked back at me through the screen. Would you really help with the deposit? Yes, I said. Not alone. A gift for the kids. And I mean it. His eyes went glassy, but he didn't look away. Then I'll do it, he said, whether she's on board or not. Over the next 2 days, we worked quietly. He called contractors, filled out paperwork. I wired the deposit and first month's rent. The property manager emailed the lease by Friday morning. They picked up keys by sunset. Jake sold the van to a small specialty dealer. Not much enough to buy 2 mattresses, some cookware, and groceries for the week. Hannah didn't speak to me, but she went with him to pick up a kitchen table. When he texted me later that night, it was a simple message. They're in. Kids have their own beds. School registration starts Monday. And then one line that stuck with me. She's staying. For now. I waited until the weekend to contact my parents. They hadn't called since the video meeting. Sunday afternoon, I drove out to their house and knocked on the front door. My mother answered. Her mouth tightened when she saw me. "Didn't expect you." "I thought we should talk," I said. She stepped aside and let me in. My dad looked up from his recliner, paper in hand. "Rachel," he said, cautious. I sat down on the couch, my hands resting in my lap. "They've signed a lease," I said. "Jake has work lined up. The kids will be back in school before winter break ends." "You did this without your sister's agreement?" my mother asked. "She agreed. Eventually. So you helped when it suited your terms." I looked at her. "I helped in a way that solved the problem." My dad set his paper down. "How much did you give them?" "Just enough to get started. Not enough to enable a repeat." He nodded. "That's actually a pretty fair approach." My mother didn't respond. "You still refused them shelter," she said finally, "when they needed it most, because that shelter would have created more problems than it solved. You always think you know best," she said. "I don't," I replied, "but I know what I can and cannot carry. That's not selfish. That's survival." She looked away. The silence between us stretched thin. Eventually, my dad cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "I'm glad the kids are safe." That night as I drove home, my phone buzzed. It was a photo from Jake. Ellie and Micah in their new room, each holding a stuffed animal, smiling shyly at the camera. They looked steady, like the ground under them had finally stopped shifting. The following week passed in quiet steps. Jake sent a few updates, short texts, mostly logistics. One was a receipt for the used table they picked up. Another showed the kids' new backpacks lined up by the door. Then came a blurry photo of the apartment's tiny kitchen, a pot on the stove, mismatched dishes stacked in a drying rack. He added, "First meal cooked indoors in weeks." Felt good. I didn't hear from Hannah. 3 days later, she finally messaged. Just one line. "We're in." But this isn't permanent. I didn't reply right away. Not because I was ignoring her, just trying to give things space. She'd agreed to stay, and that was enough for now. On Thursday, Jake let me know the kids were enrolled at the elementary school 3 blocks from the apartment. He sent a short video of Ellie walking down the hall with a staff member carrying a folder, Micah trailing behind her, dragging his lunchbox on wheels. The school wasn't fancy, but it was clean welcoming. Their teacher had even sent a note to say Ellie had already made a friend. The day after that, Jake started his first full shift with the contractor. He was wiring a commercial garage that needed a full update. He texted me at the end of the day, "Feels good to be back doing something with my hands." I waited a few more days before calling my parents again. It was a Sunday. I timed it for mid-afternoon after lunch before the evening news. My father picked up first. "Rachel," he said, like he was still adjusting to hearing from me again. I wanted to check in. "The kids started school this week. Jake's back at work. I heard," he said. "Your mother mentioned it." The kids looked good in the photo. We talked for a few minutes about logistics. He asked about heating costs out there and whether Jake's new job had benefits. Then he cleared his throat. "You know," he said slowly, "we may have jumped the gun on that whole condo thing. I know you were trying to help," I said, "but help has to work for everyone. Otherwise, it's just pressure in a different package." There was a long pause. "You did more than we gave you credit for," he said, "and I'm grateful you stepped in when you did." The next day, my mother called. She didn't open with small talk, just said, "Your aunt called me." I waited. "She said you told her what happened." "No, she called me," I said. She already knew most of it. "She thinks you were right," my mother added. There was a silence on the line. Then more quietly, she said, "I'm still not sure what to think." "That's okay. She paused. "I didn't expect things to go this far. We always bailed them out. And eventually things calmed down. This was different." "It was already falling apart before I stepped in," I said. She didn't argue. Later that evening, I received a text from Jake. It was a picture of the living room. Blank walls, a folding couch, the kids building with blocks on the floor. He added, "They're sleeping through the night. Haven't done that since early summer." By the end of the week, I had the first real phone call with Hannah since the video meeting. She didn't start with an apology. That wasn't her way. She just said, "I registered for a couple shifts at the consignment shop near the bus stop." "That's good," I said. "And I signed up for a CPR course," she added. "They said I could sub for preschool aides if I finished that." We talked for 10 minutes, mostly about the kids. She said Ellie was already asking for new books. Micah had been given line leader duty on Thursday and took it very seriously. I listened. I told her that sounded like progress. She didn't push for praise, and I didn't offer any. It was too early for that. But I did say one thing before we hung up. "I'm glad you're trying, Hannah." Her voice softened for the first time. "Me too." After the call, I sat by the window for a while, the same place I'd been when I first decided to hold the line. The lake looked different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. The water hadn't solved anything, but it had held space for it. The quiet held for once in a way that didn't feel empty. Spring arrived earlier than expected that year, not with sunshine exactly, but with the kind of soft gray mornings that make the city feel a little more forgiving. The lake thawed along the edges. Patches of green started pushing through along the sidewalks. 3 months had passed since Jake and Hannah moved into their apartment. Since then, things had begun to settle, not perfectly, but with enough shape to hold. The kids had taped drawings to their bedroom walls. Jake's promotion came through at the contractor's office. He was officially handling residential rewiring projects, not just basic labor. His hours were long but steady. Hannah still worked part-time at the consignment shop, and she'd started covering afternoons at the daycare across the street. Nothing permanent, but it gave her a rhythm. She texted occasionally now. Updates about Ellie's reading level. Photos of Micah's dinosaur-themed art project. She didn't talk much about the van, or the months they'd spent on the road, but one afternoon she sent a message that just said, "We had pasta tonight and nobody cried." Felt big. Around that time, my dad called to talk through some changes to his retirement account. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell he was reaching out. We reviewed his numbers, talked through options. After a few minutes of silence, he said, "I saw Ellie on the video call last week. She looked good, healthier." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "She's sleeping better," I said. "Micah, too." He cleared his throat. "Your mother's having a harder time admitting it, but she sees it too. It wasn't a full apology, but it was something." A few weeks later, my mom called. It was a Tuesday evening. I answered, expecting it to be about something practical, a recipe maybe, or a reminder about a birthday coming up. Instead, she said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about enabling." I waited. I didn't see it at first, I really didn't. I just thought I was helping. But your grandmother did the same thing with me, always covered things, always softened the landing. It took me years to grow up because no one ever made me face the messes I made. She didn't speak for a long moment after that. I didn't realize I was doing the same thing to Hannah. Until you said no. I didn't say anything right away. Eventually I said, "It's hard to see when we're in the middle of it." "I'm still learning," she said. "It's harder than I thought." That conversation marked something new between us. Not reconciliation exactly, but the beginning of something honest. When spring break rolled around, I flew out to visit them. Their apartment was modest, just a second-floor walk-up with thin walls and carpet that had seen better days. but the kids had their own beds, a full pantry, and a shelf filled with library books. Ellie met me at the door holding a paper she'd written about frogs. Micah showed me the classroom photo where he was circled in orange marker. His name was printed at the bottom, Micah Bennett Star Helper March. Jake gave me a tour even though the whole place could be walked through in under 2 minutes. He'd built a bookshelf from leftover plywood and proudly pointed out the level lines. Didn't even warp, he said. Hannah was quieter that weekend. She moved through the kitchen, easily set out snacks, made space without fuss. On the second night, she stepped out onto the balcony after dinner. I followed a few minutes later. The air was cool. The wind carried a faint smell of something grilled from a unit below. She leaned on the railing. "Not quite the Grand Canyon," she said. "No," I replied, "but it's got its own view." We stood in silence for a while. Then she said, "I'm trying." I didn't answer. I thought chasing freedom would open everything up, but it just made things smaller, tight spaces, empty accounts, long nights. She exhaled. "I didn't expect it to cost so much." I waited. I'm not saying I regret all of it. There were some good moments, but I see now it was never about the road. It was about running. She turned toward me. "You didn't give us what we wanted, but you gave us what we needed, even when it made everyone mad." The light from the kitchen fell across her face. She looked tired, but steadier. "You didn't just help," she added. "You helped without erasing yourself." We stayed out there until the kids called us in to help with a puzzle. Ellie needed help with the edge pieces. Micah wanted someone to find the missing corner that had fallen under the couch. Inside that tiny living room with mismatched cushions and a pot simmering on the stove, everything felt just level. Thanksgiving came faster than I expected. Flights were booked early, so I offered to fly to them instead of asking the kids to make the trip. Jake and Hannah's apartment wasn't built for big gatherings, but nobody minded. My parents decided to drive down and stay at a nearby motel. My mother packed half her kitchen into the car along with her roasting pan and the same lace tablecloth she's used since I was in high school. The apartment was already warm when I arrived. The folding table had been extended with a borrowed card table from the neighbor next door. Ellie had drawn paper turkeys for the walls. Micah had cut strips of orange and yellow construction paper into a chain that looped around the window. Jake met me at the door. "It's tight," he said, smiling. "But it works." Hannah stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Watch the middle leg of the table. It wobbles if you lean on it." "We'll eat carefully," I said. That night, as we all gathered around the mismatched chairs, there was a stretch of silence right before the meal. Everyone seemed unsure who should speak first. My mother eventually raised her glass and said, "To new beginnings." We ate in that small room, elbow to elbow. The gravy was lumpy and the rolls burned a little, but nobody complained. Ellie asked for seconds. Micah fell asleep in his chair with cranberry sauce on his shirt. Later, while the adults sipped coffee and the kids worked on a puzzle, I noticed the old patterns trying to creep back in. My mother handed Hannah the largest slice of pie like she always had. My father began telling a story about the time Hannah talked her way out of a speeding ticket in high school, then stopped himself halfway through, realizing the tone was different now. We weren't pretending anymore. At one point, Hannah made a quiet comment, something like, "Maybe by next Thanksgiving we'll be back on the road again." She didn't look at anyone as she said it. Jake paused, then said, "We've talked about that. The kids need consistency." His voice was steady, not harsh, just clear. Hannah didn't argue. She met his gaze, then nodded once. My mother surprisingly added, "The children really do seem better here. You can see it in how much calmer they are." No one pushed further. The moment passed, and we moved on. After dinner, I sat at the kitchen table with Ellie while she worked on a science project. She was cutting out shapes from construction paper, gluing them onto a poster board labeled "The Water Cycle." "Aunt Rachel," she said, not looking up. Remember when we lived in the van and I was sad all the time? I looked at her. Yeah, I said. I remember. I'm not sad anymore, she said simply. Then she went back to cutting out clouds. Later that night, I stepped out onto the patio to get some air. The complex overlooked a strip of parked cars and the back of another row of buildings, but the air was cool and quiet. Hannah joined me a few minutes later, a cup of tea in her hand. She leaned on the railing. Not quite the life I pictured, she said. No, I used to think settling down was like giving up, she said. But now, I don't know. I stayed quiet. There were parts of the trip I loved, she added. Watching the kids see wild horses, sleeping under the stars. But it was always hard. I just didn't want to admit it. She looked down at her tea, then back at me. I'm trying to find peace in the parts of life that don't look like a postcard. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she said, "Thank you for not giving us what we asked for." I looked over. You gave us what we actually needed. Even when none of us wanted to hear it. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything to say. We stood there a while longer, the hum of traffic in the distance, the sound of Micah laughing through the open window as he played with Ellie, and the quiet relief that comes when something once broken starts to mend. The next morning I left early to catch my flight. Jake walked me to the car while the kids were still sleeping. He handed me a travel mug filled with coffee and thanked me again for everything. You really turned things around, he said. I didn't do it alone, I told him. He nodded. But you were the first one who didn't just say yes to keep the peace. Back at home, the city felt different. Not quieter, not slower, just clearer. My routine came back easily. Client calls, coffee shops, evening walks by the lake. But there was a steadiness in me that hadn't been there before. Over the weeks that followed, small things kept arriving. My dad called one evening to ask about adding a will to his retirement plan. He didn't say much else, but he stayed on the line longer than usual. My mother sent me a photo of Ellie's reading award. It came with a single sentence, "I know you helped make this possible." Jake updated me now and then. Their rent was paid on time. The daycare had offered Hannah a longer shift. Ellie joined the school's little science club. Micah had stopped asking when they were going back to the van. They were still in the beginning stages of rebuilding, but the foundation was real. That mattered more than anything else. The biggest change, though, wasn't in them. It was in me. For the first time in my life, I hadn't fixed things by shrinking myself. I hadn't abandoned my boundaries just to be seen as good or generous. And in doing that, I found a kind of peace that giving in never brought. My therapist said once, "Sometimes the healthiest kind of love is the kind that says no." I didn't understand that fully until now. Saying no doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you care enough to hope someone else learns to stand on their own feet and that you trust they can. When I look back on it now, I don't feel anger, just relief. We're all still learning, still adjusting, still stretching into new roles. But this time, it feels honest. It feels earned. And I've learned that justice, the kind that really lasts, doesn't always come with fanfare or applause. Sometimes it looks like two kids sleeping peacefully in their own beds, like a sister learning how to begin again, like a daughter reclaiming space in her own life and knowing that was enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of something in your own life, setting a hard boundary, helping someone the right way, or learning to trust your instincts, I'd love to hear it in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, you're welcome to subscribe and stay connected. Take good care of yourself. And remember, love with limits is still love. Maybe the truest kind there is,